Do you want me to move that down? So, no, you're right.
All good. So I'm here with Claire Foord, who is the founder of Still Aware.
Yes.
But Claire shared your very personal story today with a room full of obstetricians and gynaecologists at the RANZCOG annual scientific meeting. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you here today?
Sure, very happy to. I think it's not just about what brought me here today, but what brought me into, I suppose, be passionate about change, particularly in the realm of stillbirth. I didn't share my full story in there because obviously, having a charity which is Still Aware is really about protecting others from and preventing stillbirth and aiding a family to be able to go home with their baby in their arms and not having to have that empty heart and empty arms as well. It's just really heartbreaking. We had a textbook pregnancy, which I really hate that term. I don't believe in it. I think that every baby and every pregnancy is different. But we were textbook and trouble-free. And after 3 years of IVF, we were pregnant with our beautiful baby girl and absolutely besotted with her already and over the moon. Got to know her incredibly well. I knew her movements, the way, the things that got her moving to. I loved to read stories to her. I loved to play certain music, and she would dance and sway in there. And I loved hanging out with her and playing with her. I did not realise that there was any reason to be concerned. I thought that after you pass 12 weeks, you're home and hosed, and pregnancy is a smooth sailing after that because you have your private obstetrician, you have your midwife. I also had a hypnobirthing instructor. I also had an antenatal acupuncturist, and I also had an antenatal yoga teacher. So I was just covering every base to be very prepared. Because I wanted knowledge. I sought knowledge, in fact. I read books, I had apps, I asked questions. Some myths were perpetuated. I got some really bad information and false information, but most of the things that really upsets me when I look back on it is there was too much of not enough information. And nobody ever told me that stillbirth was a possibility. So in the third trimester, I was 38 weeks pregnant, and my movements really did start to change. But I didn't realise that was reason for concern. In fact, I was fed the information of, oh, it's okay, baby's slowed down, she's running out of room, she's conserving energy. Well, actually, a baby shouldn't need to conserve energy. A baby should get stronger and more active, and the movements should feel more intense, and I should be able to see her rolling around in there. So when people would touch my belly, it started to become that she wouldn't respond in the way that she used to. I did say to my obstetrician, is this normal? That was the question that I asked. I didn't specify anything about movements because, like I said, I didn't know that movements were anything to be worried about, but I was concerned about something, but I don't know what. He then asked me a question in response to my question. He never answered mine because he didn't ask me any questions about it, but he said, is your baby moving? And I said, yeah. And very shortly after that, our consultation was finished. I went home. A week later, I said, is this normal? I asked the same question because her movements had actually slowed down even more. Again, I wasn't sure whether that was a reason to be concerned. I didn't know that movements were anything to be worried about, particularly a change. And I said, is this normal? And he asked me that same question again and said, is your baby moving? And I said, yes. And I went home, and a week later, I was sitting on the couch. I looked at my husband and I went, oh my gosh, she wants out. And she was going insanely crazy in there. And I remembered this, actually, babies slow down, they conserve energy. So I went to bed. In hindsight, that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. From what we now know, statistically speaking, and what evidence is showing us is perhaps that may be a sign of a baby in not just fetal distress, but it may be a sign of fetal hypoxia. So perhaps that was her last-ditch effort at saying, help me, which is horrible to think about, and just, makes me, I hold back the tears and swallow big, when you think, wow, I had so many opportunities to keep her protected, and she communicated so well how she was doing in there. But I went to bed, and at 2 a.m. was the last time I felt her move. And so when I got up that morning, I rang my obstetrician, and he asked me a question. And he said, is your baby moving? And I said, no. And there was a huge difference and a massive disparity in yes and no. But neither of us had a conversation about it because the question wasn't asked in an open-ended way. I had no idea why he was asking if the baby moved, but I also didn't ask that. But I wasn't really given the opportunity to ask either. Now, is it his fault? Is it my fault? Is it the system's, fault? It's actually, I don't want to blame anyone. It's not about that. It's actually saying there are things that I could have done differently. There are things that he could have done differently. There are things that all of my, healthcare professionals in that and experts in their field, they had an opportunity to tell me about something that I deserved to know, which was that stillbirth exists, and that my best indicator of a baby's health and well-being were her movements, and that I could have possibly protected her, and that my daughter Alfie could be here today, and she'd be 6 years old. So I don't want this to happen to anybody else. That is the reason, and that's what brought me here today to the Ranscog ASM. But it's a long journey. It's a long journey to get to this point, and it's a lot of uphill battles of knocking on doors and advocating for change and being that voice of thousands of families who deserve to bring their babies home, because I just desperately don't want it to happen to anybody else. And that's where Still Aware came from, so that we could hopefully breed a change in the way that we talk about stillbirth, so that we can approach it and communicate it and not think that we're going to scare people and that being blindsided is better, particularly when we're talking about 1 in every 135 pregnancies ending in stillbirth. We've got to talk about it. We have to change the way we communicate amongst healthcare practitioner and mum and family, because we're all part of that same care provision. We're all part of the deal together. We're a team, and we need to communicate well with one another so that we can keep a baby protected. And we all have a responsibility to care for our children. We cannot continually pass that responsibility over. And so part of my parenting, Alfie, is what I do through Still Aware, and allowing others to the opportunity to be able to parent their children in the flesh here and now.
So what were your messages today?
Very much around communication, big time. So there's daily actions that families can take to keep their baby safe, but it's about instigating that conversation with care practitioners, instigating that conversation with women and families, so that their patients have the tools that they need to keep their baby safe. The tools are trust your body and your baby. If something feels different, act. Don't wait. And your intuition is really powerful. If something doesn't feel right, maybe it isn't. So if you're feeling funny, if something feels strange or unusual, you need to go in and get checked. And these are tools that clinicians and obstetricians, GPs, midwives need to be passing on to mums and expectant families. Additionally, movements, they're a great indicator of a baby's health and well-being. So if a baby's movements are slow, so they decrease or change in any way, we need to know. But it's not just about a change in frequency, so the regularity of the way a baby moves, but also pattern and strength. So the time of the day that the baby moves, and traditionally speaking and generally speaking, most healthy babies will move at night before they go to bed. So if that's the time of the day that you choose to play with your baby, use that time optimally and get to know who that baby is, so that together with your health care provider you can know how baby is. The way in which your baby plays with you is also critical. So if it was a runner or a mover and a shaker, a dancer, and suddenly becomes a chiller or a couch potato, then we need to act, because that's different than what your baby is normally behaving. And then settling to sleep on your side in pregnancy. So passing that information, and that's a really easy thing to do. And it's not about saying you must stay on your side, and it's actually not about which side. It's either side is fine. So that's great too. So settling on your side is sleeping safely for mother and baby in pregnancy. And if you wake up on your back, there's no reason to panic. Because in fact you would have been on your side for the deepest and longest part of your sleep. It's about settling again on your side and having a restful sleep that you know is sleeping safely and healthy for your baby in pregnancy. And those are the tools we have that we can pass on to mums and dads and partners and families in the extended community to keep a baby safe. And those are the tools we have that are best method to aid a preventable stillbirth and to reduce the chance of it happening to, unfortunately, over 2,000 families every year in Australia.
You talked about the word stillbirth and that you like that word, and
you
encourage clinicians to use it. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have a lot of words in the medical system, not just in pregnancy, but generally, that are kind of negative. And if we look at pregnancy, we have words like miscarriage. Even miscarriage has negative connotations. A failure to thrive, incompetent cervix, unfavourable uterus. I mean, the list goes on. But where stillbirth is concerned, it's a word that I think a lot of people are frightened of using but I actually think it's a really beautiful word because it actually validates life in it as well. So we need to remember that these babies are babies, that it's not just fetal demise, that this is stillbirth, which is still birth. It's still a life. And so in using the word freely, we're not only allowing a conversation to occur and allowing people to understand that stillbirth exists, but we're also validating that a life did also exist, because a baby unfortunately was stillborn and stillbirth does happen, but it is stillbirth.
And you acknowledge the significance of today,
yes.
The date today.
I know, isn't that amazing? That, and I'm sure that there was some sort of plan to it as well. I'm sure RANZCOG are very clever. Today is International Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day. And whilst this is one day a year, it's not the only day that we think of our children. Our children are very much part of our lives, and we think of them every day, just like we do our living children. So you're not reminding us that they existed, but in having a day of acknowledgement for pregnancy and infant loss, what we can do is allow others to also remember our children with us. And so particularly on the 15th of October every year worldwide, we have that day, but we also have the Wave of Light, and the Wave of Light happens at 7 p.m. On the 15th of October every year around the world, where we ask you to light a candle in honour of the babies chasing butterflies in the sky who were stillborn, who were where loss was experienced, and that these children's lives are not forgotten, and that you're remembering and honouring them with us.
And what does the launch of the Safer Baby Bundle today mean for you?
Yeah, that also happened
like
today too. I know,
your
right?
Family, yeah.
So the Safer Baby Bundle is going to be a really good tool, and it's going to be one of what we hope will be many tools for change. So the Safer Baby Bundle is something that we are an in-kind supporter on, by charitable means and in a philanthropic fashion, providing advice as a charity through consumer involvement in creating tools for clinicians to identify potential ways of modifying risk. Now, this is a clinical tool where you can go in and get accreditation through ACM or RANZCOG or the College of GPs, and walk away hopefully armed with more knowledge and understanding of what the risk factors are. But what we also have to remember is the Safer Baby Bundle is a really good start, but the tools that we also have with Still Aware will help to guide that Safer Baby Bundle to be able to communicate that with your expectant families, because the way in which we communicate the tools is also really critical. The way in which we have the conversation and ensuring that it's understood and with clarity, so that people walk away empowered and armed with responsibility, knowing the things that they can do that are protective in pregnancy. That's also really important. So it's not just about handing information, but it's also about having that open-ended conversation and saying, hey, do you understand what I've said? Can you tell me when you're going to give me a call? That is not to be condescending or patronising. That is actually to say, okay, so I'm teaching and you're repeating, so that I can be sure, and I'm pretending I'm a clinician here or a consumer, that I can be sure that you've understood everything that I've said, so that I know to the best of my ability I've empowered you to be the best parent that you are and the best parent you can be in pregnancy, to protect your baby and help keep their life alive, well and healthy, and give you the arms that you deserved, and that's full of your little beautiful baby and going home to a house full of tears and happiness. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.